There's some lessons in business that we learn too late, but then we get to share them with other people. And this is one of them for me because whether we realize it or not in our day to day, in our business, we are creating a culture. And here's what nobody talks about. Most leaders, entrepreneur, quote unquote bosses, we tell ourselves, we think we care about our people. And we do, but we might not be carrying in the right buckets because 60% of employees feel that their bosses don't care about them at all. And today's guest, Dr. Angela Jackson, is an absolute savage energy and an author of a brand new book called Win-Win, which is incredible. And she not only brings the hard data, but she brings the heart to bridge that gap so that we get to keep our employees and not have them feel like that. And so welcome back to the Mind of George Show. This is where we cut through the noise and get real about what it takes to build and scale something meaningful that impacts the world. No tactics, no hacks, no sleazy strategies, just honest conversations about aligning who you are with what you do and scaling it through marketing, through messaging, through customer journey, and all the things I love helping you with. And in today's episode with Dr. Angela Jackson, we talk about why culture happens with or without us, the real reason that people quit or quietly quit or disengage, and it has nothing to do about money, how we convert quiet quitting into engaged ownership, and how we can build real retention through relationships. Because we cannot scale our businesses, we cannot scale our impact until we scale our culture. And today's conversation is a massive, massive helpful conversation to shift perspective, to give us strategies and tools that work, that feel good, that have results associated. And so if you are ready to move beyond that quote unquote grind culture or push everybody's faces to the grindstone, or you want to retain your best people, or you're building a team and you want to build one that lasts, that performs as a team, then this episode is for you. And I can't do what is shared in this episode as much justice as she can, but some of the things that really resonated with me when she said them was we're creating culture whether we realize it or not. People don't leave companies, they leave cultures. And so every employee should think like an owner. And these are some of the things that we unpack inside of this episode. And so I can't wait to share it with you. I can't wait to hear what you think. So without further ado, let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. Today, I think, and she gave me the label, she said today she can be our ChatGPT when it comes to hearts and minds. But today I am joined by Dr. Angela Jackson, and I feel so humble to have her. She is the founder of Future Forward Strategies, has a brand new book out, which we're going to talk about, which is all about winning and using the hearts and minds and data to help with retention and culture. And if I read her bio, we would spend the first 25 minutes of this podcast just giving her accolades. But she is a lecturer at Harvard, does research, has shared at TEDx and Concordia, Chamber of Commerce. She's been featured in CNN, Women Tech Talk, the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And she, from my understanding and my connecting with her and her energy, is like the queen of taking logic, putting it into the heart, and helping people build and scale their businesses. But plus, she can research it behind. So retention, about creating win-win and how to stay in the future and understanding the times that we are navigating to be able to create the results we want, but more importantly, the culture that we want. And so I am really honored. I'm really excited. So I don't even know what to call you. Do I call you Angela? Do I call you Dr. Jackson? Which do you prefer?
Well, George, we're friends now, so you can call me Angela. It's perfect.
It's amazing. And I'm so honored to have you on the show. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Of course. And thank you again for having me.
Of course. And we have one of those spicy episodes today because we have a hard stop. So we're going to go straight into the meat today. And you said something to me before we started recording, and I was like, I need to ask you about this, and everybody needs to hear this. And you're like, culture. It's the thing that we're all creating, whether we realize we're doing it or not. And I would just love for you to unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just with my work and research at Harvard University, a lot of courses I teach are on innovation and entrepreneurship. And one thing I say to my students, this is like the first literally day of class when I teach this class in the fall, entrepreneurship and innovation, is you get to create the culture that you want. And I say to them, sometimes you've had great bosses, some of you have had bad bosses, some of you have had mentors and been in good cultures, and you know what it feels like. You know the things that didn't feel good. With intention as an entrepreneur, we get to create that new environment, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so I say to my students, why not be conscious? Really think about the world of work that you want to be in, how you want to feel, how you want to do your work. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we think a lot about making a profit and then we say we'll fix everything else. What I've seen in my research with companies, small, medium, and large, is we'll figure it out later. Doesn't usually work that way. The culture that you start with, if you're not really attuned to it, that's the culture that's going to grow and to manifest. And that results in, and this is why I wrote the book, The Win-Win Workplace, whether you have a win-win workplace where people feel invested in, they're growing, the culture is good, or what I call in the book, a zero-sum workplace where, people are doing the quiet quitting. They're checking their internet to see what other job is out there, where there's a lack of trust and really a lack of belief in management. Talking about a statistic, ChatGPT, there was a survey across the US of American workers, and it said upwards of 60% of people said their bosses don't care about them.
Mm,
And what's funny, George, is in my research, I've never talked to a CEO or leadership team that said they don't care about their people. And so, how I make sense of that stat when people say they don't feel like their bosses are cared about them is that there's a disconnect
mhm.
between what bosses and leaderships are doing and how people are feeling it. And I just think in the world of entrepreneurship, just like we're envisioning the product or service we want to sell, we can also vision that culture we want to create.
That is so good. The quiet quitting hit like a ton of bricks. And I also love that you have the research to back it up because you interview people and you talk with people that I think a lot of the times this happens accidentally. It's not because we set out to create a toxic culture. It's not because we set out to create a quiet quitting culture. But to your point, the culture that you start with is what you'll finish. And I know I've fallen into that trap as an entrepreneur most of my career of like, oh, when I make more money, I'll fix it. Or when we do this, we'll hire it in. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making when it comes to accidentally creating these culture besides like the when I make more money?
Yeah, so the big one that we see a lot, and again, this is looking at a pattern to date of over 2,000 kind of startup
Mm,
organizations. Also, in terms of like more mature companies, we've looked at 1,700 of those and just watching some of the leadership moves, right? And so the biggest one that we think about is around who you want to hire. And so a lot of times with entrepreneurs, we are trying to hire people who are just like us, who are motivated just like us, because we think that they can get us, they can understand. But one thing that we've actually seen is that when you have and do an audit of your leadership team, what you're bringing to the table, it's really important for you to do a matrix to see your next hire, what are they bringing that's complementary. You want to double down. If everyone's type A on the team, you need some other people who are going to slow you down a bit and maybe ask the inquisitive questions, right? To actually anchor culture and value. And so, really thinking about the prototype. If you're the entrepreneur, the driver, who on your team is going to be the heart and the culture carrier, for example,
mm,
that's going to bring us back to the mission on why we did and founded this team? Because obviously, yes, money is a great motivator, but most entrepreneurs that I've seen and come into contact with, they've started a business based on a problem or practice they've seen or an opportunity, something they didn't have. They're visionary seeing around the corner. So having someone who can continue to anchor you to that vision to make
mm.
sure you're living on that is great. The third thing that we see is that when entrepreneurs start is trying to think about how you measure this culture. I'm a huge fan of like this lean startup method, build and fail fast, but really thinking about that piece of it around learning and who's like taking in the slowdown to capture those learnings to make sure as we're building and we're moving fast, we're also starting to get some pattern recognition and we're actually tracking those outcomes and those moves and those learnings along the way.
Oh, I love that. And this is why I love the data part because you have measurements built into this, right? And I'm going to just pretend I'm listening to this because I this is something I face actually with a lot of companies that I'm helping scale, right? Because I help small, medium, large. And one of the things I get asked all the time is how do you create KPIs around culture? And so I
Yeah.
would love to hear like your thoughts of like how you can create KPIs around culture because you've nailed so many parts of like the quiet quitting. And really, I don't think any of us set out to hire a team member so they want to be on the computer or internet quitting. We want them to be a part of it, but it almost feels so hard to tangibly measure sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I write about this in the book around the first step that you want to do when you're thinking about culture is just understand what it is. And in the first chapter, I talk about centering worker voice. And I want to just say that's bigger than just a checkbox or a suggestion box. really what we want to do and what we've seen companies who are doing this well are asking questions to their employees about what matters most to them. So we really want to deeply understand, why did someone choose to come work with us, especially when it's a startup and entrepreneur. Typically, they're coming in because they love you as a visionary. They love the vision for the company. They are motivated by you as a leader and what they think that they can accomplish, working in partnership with you. So really understanding beyond a paycheck, what was the motivation and what's the expectation? Because again, a lot of people are hired for a role, they get in it, it's very different. So it's really important to get a baseline of, why were people hired? Like, what motivated them to come? Two is this role what they expected? Three, the last question that we always ask is, do they feel like they are being utilized to their full potential? And what those are three basic ones that you can use. And so what you want to do is get a baseline in the beginning. And what we've seen some of the best companies do and best leaders do is think about, at least on a monthly basis, you're checking in on that. And it doesn't have to be a formal, we're checking in on the KPIs. It could be when you're doing your one-to-one meeting with them again, just say, based on what we brought you in at, how much of your role are you still doing that? Is that 60, 70? Is it 100%? Okay, what's the other 30% you might be doing? Let us know a bit more about that. Because in that way, you're engaging them, you're talking about their own professional development and why they won't stay. You may learn in those conversations that 30% is something that they love, and maybe that's what you have them do more of, or that they hate, right? And what you're doing, and the idea is to keep your finger on the pulse while you're building and moving fast. You just want to make sure you're bringing everyone along and people aren't stepping off the train with disengagement, quiet quitting, or just feeling just not positive about the vision, or scattered.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I also love how quickly you can disseminate this and share it, because I'm like, preach, preach, preach. This is landing at a very deep level.
No, I'm glad that you said that. And I think sometimes people think this is hard. The KPIs are going to be different for every entrepreneur. But again, just wondering about your culture, what are 2 to 3 things? And we don't want 10 or 12, because 10 or 12 we won't track. 2 to 3, we can check in with people and we can remember to do that. We can put a post-it on our computer to say, just check in. Where are you at in capacity? How are you feeling about this role? And then you keep it moving. But these are data points as a leader that you can spot problems. And I'll tell you why this is really important. I just got off a phone call with a colleague, and he went back and had dinner with his former company before he joined us. And he goes, Angela, I'm sitting at the table there, the CEO of the company's at the top head of the table. There's like 20 of us there. Down at the end, there are, a group of his employees who are rolling their eyes, kind of snickering at what he's talking about. This is a startup organization with about 30 employees max. And so to have a large percentage of them at a table, rolling their eyes, not engaged, he goes, I felt like calling the CEO and telling him, because he's a friend. He was asking my advice on what he should do. And I was like, well, if he's seriously a friend, that you might want to give him this feedback, maybe not name names attached to it, but like, that's the death of an organization. That's how you start seeing things go south. You're at a table of 20, the CEO's there. He'd tell you it was a fabulous dinner, right? Like, he paid for everyone. There was lots of engaged conversation, but little did he know at the opposite end, the engagement was not positive at all. And so, like, how do you keep your finger on that? Who's going to be your trusted partner who will pull you in when things like this begin to happen? And, startup world is hard. So, everything is not going to be rah, rah, rah. And we know that. And so I think when the times are hard, these are like truly when we need to dig into these practices.
100%. And I love also, like, the one part I want to highlight, as simple as it is like, if you have 12, you're not going to track it and measure it. Like, it's finding those core KPIs. But to your point about culture, marketing data and having dashboards, it's great because you can look at it and it's ever changing. But with culture, it's, you have to go put your finger on that pulse. You have
Yes.
to put yourself in those conversations. And, for everybody listening to this, I also think, in talking about this through like a team could be a contractor that you're using to write copy for you. It could be somebody doing your social media. It's adding to the situation, the relationship, and the heart, and making it deeper than just the job, which I absolutely love. And I love also, like, in the win-win workplace, one of the things that you talk about, and even to your dinner example, is about having like buy-in, but also having like energy and productivity, right? And as you scale organizations, right, it can't be just, oh, there's one-on-one, right? There's companies with 700 employees, but you have to have like that emotional buy-in. And so what are some of the ways in which people can go about, and I know that you use evidence and research and all of this, but some of the things that they can start to bring into their businesses or into their current culture, because to your point, whatever culture you start with, you're going to have. And I think the mistake is, oh, I'll do this when, but like day to day is like bringing this in now. So like, where do people start?
But the second big piece after we, think about centering employee voice and understanding, like how do they understand and feel the culture today? So that's what you want to know. The
Yeah.
second thing you want to know is that, and we do this a lot in startups, we're grabbing the best people we know. Sometimes we're putting them in positions that they've never done that role before, but we feel like they could have potential and run with it. The biggest thing that we want to make sure as entrepreneurs is that when we bring in that next layer of people and start hiring, we need to train our managers. A lot of us know, and I write about this in the book, how do you move frontline managers to frontline leaders? Because most managers are managers because they're a great individual contributor, not because they've ever been taught to manage people along the lines of culture. So when you start getting at that place where you're getting that management level, it's so critical to make sure that you're training and having offers for managers so that they understand the culture they should be leading. So it's more than just being an individual contributor. It's more than just giving someone tasks and supervising someone. Like we want them to become culture carriers. They are you when you're not in the room. Like they're making sure that the rank and file have that same felt experience as your vision. So I think it's really important. And what we've seen with our data, companies really double down on those trainings. And it's had a transformative like impact on companies. There's one global company now, they had bank branches and they saw a third of them were underperforming. They did a bit of listening, and what they found out from the listening surveys is that how someone experienced their manager at that bank branch, that determined how many assets they had under management. And
Mm.
as you can imagine, George, like if good customer service is there, people want to come in, they want to put more money in your bank. When it's not, then those people aren't putting money. And so what they realize is that key indicator is how the people working in that branch felt about their manager. They end up doing a training around this, and they were able to bring 2/3 of their kind of bank branches that were underperforming to performing. There was a third of the managers who probably shouldn't have been managers in the first place, and they were able to identify those, work with them, and start to think about how do we promote people without them having to be people managers. So really thinking about how do we give more leadership opportunity, and maybe it's not over people. Like everyone is not built for that.
I would vouch because Ashley, my CEO, she's the later manager of people. I feel like I'm too much of a liability where like I'll forget or I'm too visionary or I'm too blank. Like it happens all the time. I actually love that distinction. And you also made another point that I think is important to call out because I think and I wouldn't call it a mistake, but something to be aware of is a lot of the times we'll hire people based on their potential, but then we have to create the culture and the leadership to be able to help them meet that potential. And one of the things I see all the time, especially with companies that I'm helping scale, is they hired these people for their potential, but then they get upset that they didn't find their own way to that potential.
Yeah.
And it's like Dr. Filling in the office.
Yeah, I love that, George. And it's so true. Like we think through osmosis, people know things. But again, like as I've done this research for this book, and we stood up a 200 member, advisory board of actual workers. The more that I learned, the more that I've realized that the assumptions we might make as entrepreneurs are some of them could be fatal, right? And especially
Mhm.
when it relates to what we think people can do and what their potential looks like in our eyes. Also thinking about what they've done in the past. Again, they could go down, they could be the best coder engineer in the world, but if you put them with a team of 3 or 4, like you said, they might be the people who say the wrong things. And so like, how do we help them reach their potential? And how do we spot some of the potholes or pitfalls that are so common? Like, again, one is getting a baseline on how people feel. Like that should be table stakes. Two is making sure our managers know how to manage people in a way that aligns with our visions as founders is really important. And to make sure we're testing that and tracking that so that you don't have an unevenness through the company.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I actually have a question about this because I think a lot of people that listen to this or a lot of people that I help, it's them. And you start as this visionary. And even in startup, a lot of times it's just you. And then we have these two hats that we have to wear, right? There's like us as the visionary, but also the executor. But then we start bringing in a team of one or a team of two. And then there's this other side where it's almost like a different outfit where we like get to be a manager, right? And I think even I made the mistake of thinking just because I'd led Marines, but the thing was, is I couldn't fire them. They couldn't quit, right? They had to do whatever I said anyways. I'm like, oh, that makes me a good leader. But then really what I was really good at was executing my job or being an entrepreneur, but I wasn't communicating effectively. I had no buy-in from team on like shared vision. I fell into the trap of like, well, this is what I see, so this is how we're going to get there. And then to your point, the employee voice wasn't there because it was really my voice that like permeated out, right? So employee voice being one, empowering, our managers to be able to carry that culture. But when we're in that, let's call it a purgatory period or growing period where like we don't have a manager yet, what are the things that we should be focused on as entrepreneurs, like with our own day to day and our own habits and communication? And even to the point of like, should we be making processes that should be passed down when a manager comes in and not waiting till they come in? Like, I would just love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the biggest thing is what you said earlier, George, is as entrepreneurs, sometimes our team are our partners and our consultants. And so really understanding first and foremost, like what is that relationship? So the practice starts there. Your practice of one, understanding what your vision is and how you want to work in the world. And also for an entrepreneur, it's important that you do that for yourself. Startup land is, as most of your listeners are doing, we're 12 to 15 hours a day. There's no on and off button. Most of us, if we are going to scale our companies, we're going really hard. And so really understanding what does that mean for me as an individual? What does that type of culture mean when we bring on the first group of people? I was with the head of Uber Health and he was saying to me, he goes, Angela, we are type A. We are burning out some of our people. They're 20 somethings. They want to do a good job. They come in and go hard, but we're burning them out. They're churning, 2 years later, et cetera. He goes, and I realize that's not good for my team because we're losing good people. And so one thing he started with his own practices, putting up boundaries, right? Like, we're going to be off during the weekend. If you send me an email on a Friday, he goes, I'm not answering it to noon on a Monday or maybe on a Tuesday because I'm not trying to, continue, right? That pattern. The second thing he was saying was, on Slack, like what he put down was like people's preferred working hours. We may say it sounds simple, but like it's transformative. If you think someone keeps plopping an 8 a.m. meeting on your calendar or one at 4:30 when you're picking up your kids, you're like, I've told them over and over not to do this. Just by having that sign where he put people's preferred hours on there and just asked everyone to respect that time. And so as entrepreneurs, these are things that we can do now. One, by setting our own boundaries about how we want to feel about work and practicing leaning on into those. That's the hardest thing you can do. That's your yoga in the world as an entrepreneur, because again, it takes so much out of you. The second is start practicing with any of your partners. It's also critical too, because these partners are the ones who are going to refer us. They will bring new business. They can be champions for our organization, for our cause and mission. And so how we relate to them, even though we may be paying them, actually really, really matters. And so
Mhm.
practicing with them. And then that leads you to when you're first getting your team, making sure that, you're bringing them into your practice. And it is indeed a practice. No one wakes up to say, I want to be, a terrible manager. It just happens. And so I think it happens a lot unintentionally. So what we want to do is just be very intentioned about what we do, how we want to use our energy, and how we want people to feel that energy,
I
feel an
love that you,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, I love that you just said that because I think to your point earlier, even in the Uber Health example, he's like, we're burning them out. I've found also that without my own boundaries or without my own practices, the people that come to work for me feel like they have to keep up and then they end up burning out accidentally, but not because I told them to, but because there's this like imaginary way the race is supposed to be run because that's what I'm embodying. So I love that point.
Yeah, and that's what we've learned, right? And we think about how we've grown up professionally. I'm Gen X. Like the social contract when I started out is like employer gives you a paycheck, you go in and you put your head down and you don't complain. You just do the work. And it was back in the day when like I tried to get there before my boss, and I would even stay when I didn't have work to do to make sure I wasn't sending the wrong signal. And a lot of that exists today as we've done our surveys, especially in startup. Like no one wants to look like they're not working hard. They want to work as hard as or harder than their boss because that's the way, as a society here in the country, at least, we've been rewarded. And so we have to understand as entrepreneurs and leaders, we are pushing against forces that are bigger than just us individually. It's really
Mhm.
a more global culture around the way we do work, which is why I wrote this book, because what I want to get across was we can go hard, we can be profitable, but people can also thrive. Like it doesn't have to be a binary. And I really believe, and this is why I'm so happy we're talking today, that entrepreneurs and founders are the ones who can lead the way on this front.
I actually agree wholeheartedly because, and I also want to acknowledge what you brought up because I don't think it's talked about enough. Like we're not talking about like nobody wants to work a 4-day work week or have flexible hours and create the outcome, but we are surrounded by grind, 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 hustle, 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 hard, 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 hard. And it's not the common conversation to talk about safety or to talk about you thriving as a person. It's even in entrepreneurship. It's like, well, I'm just going to keep sacrificing
Yeah.
and I've been blessed with the lessons from God to help a few people after exits, and they were more miserable after the exit because they had lost their identity in the grind and the hustle. They didn't have a sense of self. They didn't have a life outside of it, and there's no meaning in that. So I love that you called that out. And I also love your mission. I support your mission 100% wholeheartedly in any way, shape, or form. Like, what are some of the other things? And I'm just going to ask you a very ambiguous question
Yeah.
because I could just listen to you talk all day about leadership and about culture. But like knowing that you have the book, and I want everybody to read the book, and we'll have it linked in the show notes, but it's called The Win-Win Workplace by Dr. Angela Jackson. But what are some of the other things that people should be really focused on when it comes to not only creating the culture for themselves, which we talked about, but also for fostering that environment to be able to have key performers and people that carry the culture? Like, what are some of the other best practices for people?
Yeah, so there's two of them. The one that I end with in the book, which I think is like the North Star, is that we've built a culture that's entrepreneurial and is around an ownership mindset, right? So that you just don't have people who are checking in for a paycheck, that they feel really invested in the company and its growth. Like that, those are the people we want to hire. And those are the people we do hire, but then over time people check out. So the idea is to keep them checked in. And so the biggest way, and what we try to do with the practices when you see these nine, and there's lots of ways to invest in people and thriving. These nine in particular show lift on the financial side. So when we looked at the
Mhm.
companies, when they're doing things like, and the second one is reimagining benefits, what they were able to talk about is we offered this benefit, this helped people stay, it helped them retain them this longer, and this is how much we were able to benefit on the financial side. So around reimagining benefits, we've done surveys with people, and people love the idea of when you think about Google or Facebook, that you get free lunch or you can play ping pong, et cetera. That's a benefit. What we've seen that's more important in retention of people is asking them, going back to centering voice, what benefits matter most to them, and getting them agency to actually choose them. And a lot of companies that we've surveyed and researched, they're using the same amount of dollars, but just by the mere fact that they're giving someone choice and optionality, again, people report that they feel seen, that a company's meeting their needs. We've seen companies who, invested millions of dollars, and people are like, I don't use that. I don't have a kid. I don't need the child care. Right. Or they're like, I don't need the 401k. I'm 25. Like, I've got student loans today. Like, how can you help me with that? I'm trying to figure out how to buy my first house. What's that benefit? And so we saw that companies who were giving more agency and more and reimagining what benefits could be, it really helped them in terms of retention and also engagement. People felt cared for. The second thing I mentioned was just around this ownership mindset. The biggest thing that we can do is we bring people along is to give them that agency, to give them that buy-in, to give them that time for innovation. So to identify problems of practice from their perch, from their position, and illuminate those and think about how they can come up with solutions to solve them. That's one of the other big ways that we've heard from people, that they want this type of agency and autonomy. And again, when I think about our world in startups, like we might start with one product, one service, but there could be ancillary opportunities if our people are actually looking for them.
Mhm.
How are they using a phone in 4 or 5 different ways that we didn't anticipate? And how can we monetize that? And what I write about in the book are idea after idea of how employees at all levels had seen opportunities for new business development or cost savings, that when we have processes in place where those ideas can actually, see the light of day with management, we can act on those. And that directly benefits the company's bottom line.
I could give just on that last piece, the benefits one I have a thought on, and it's really a just keep listening to Dr. Angela. Yes. On that second piece, I could give you 1,000 stories, and just as a synopsis to just be an integrous with companies that I've consulted, I've gone in for a 3-day intensive to help them scale the business. And everybody comes to that all hands meeting, right? Everyone's there for the kickoff for an hour. And then it's all the C-suite speaking. Here's our problems. Here's our issues. We don't have a solution. And then I separate them and I'm like, amazing. You guys go get lunch. I'm going to stay in with the team. They walk out of the room. And within 10 minutes, I have a solution to every single
Wow.
problem that was presented.
Wow.
And then I don't do this anymore, but what I used to do is I used to go brief them and I'm like, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do this. That they're like, this is why we brought you in. And I'm like, actually, none of these were my idea. Let me introduce you to the solution. And then I would walk them back in the room. I'm like, here's your solution. And I would be just facilitating communication, but really creating the space for them to have autonomy and agency, but also to be able to share those ideas. Because I think earlier when you were talking about internet quitting, it's something that I've seen so many times where because somebody isn't invested or bought in, like you say, and they don't feel like that ownership and agency, like, oh, it won't affect the company. Oh, it's totally fine. We'll just let it keep doing it this way. That is such a valid point. It's huge.
It's so huge, and it's I'm smiling because I was just at an engagement with a team of about 80 people, and we are in a fireside chat, and the head of the department said, we listen to our employees. We do an annual survey. I said, oh great. Can you tell us how we should think about increasing our culture? I said, okay, I could tell you that, but let me ask a question to the audience. How many of you, presented, gave your feedback? They held up their hands. I was like, keep your hand up if you felt like someone engaged you around your feedback, if you heard back. Like literally, 80% of the hands dropped. Probably a little more, it was like 90. Like of the 80, there were probably like 8 or 9 hands still up. And they looked around. I was like, so here is what we've seen in our research is the problem. We ask people their ideas, we hear them and we look at them, and then we don't close the loop. We don't follow up. So what happens when that happens? People are like, they stop giving you their ideas. They stop leaning in. They're like, okay, I filled out this survey for the 100th time, and like nothing's changed, or no one even followed back up on me with this new idea. So like, why would I continue to do that? And so
Mhm.
that's the biggest shift that we've seen, is that idea of closing the loop. It's kind of what you did, George. You went back in and you said, okay, these are the people, let's broker. So we're all saying the same things. Leadership, take a beat so you could actually hear the solution. And how do we build a practice around that? Because again, listening is $1 billion, industry.
Yeah.
And yet you've still got people who feel like they're not being heard, large and small companies.
Yep. You're preaching for this podcast because open loops drive me nuts. And I'm like, it's not even to the point that their idea is executed. It's that they feel heard and seen and acknowledged, which closes the loop. And then the non-educated researcher in me also knows it's called the Zeigarnik effect. And it actually creates unresolved emotional conflict in people when they invest in something and comment on something and it's not closed, which just keeps creating reactance. So there's like psychology built into it as well. So I love that. And the note on the benefit part too, like reimagining benefits, I've seen that so many times where I think I've seen the mistake of people thinking that if I just throw money at the problem, or this is what they all asked for, so I'm going to throw money at it. But really, that autonomy and agency of like, well, if you have a single mom, like, and she just wants to leave work at 3 o'clock every day to go spend 2 hours with her son and she can do the emails later, like maybe she doesn't need to be in that meeting and she can back brief it. Like the amount of assumptions that we make for the quote unquote benefits that
Yeah.
people are looking for come back to your second point where we're not asking and allowing people to have ownership over them. And then because of it, we're just assuming over and over and over, and it pushes people out. So I love those. And those were what, 2 of the 9 strategies that you have in the book?
Yeah, yep. They're two of the 9 strategies. And I just say for benefits too, like as an entrepreneur, every dollar we spend counts. And so,
Mhm.
like, it's better to spend it on things that actually matter to people versus what we think will matter to them, right? Because there's a higher perceived value. And to your point, that mom, you can give her all the free lunch in the world, but what she really wants is to be at the bus stop and be
Yep.
home with her kid for that hour. And that costs you zero, right? And so,
Zero.
why not think about doing these things that actually matter to people? And that flexibility, it's not even working remotely. What we've heard from people as we've done the research on the win-win workplace companies is that flexibility and empathy is what people are really, really looking for. So that's more than lunch, that's more than vacation days, etc. It's more like, do you know that I have this lived reality outside of work? And there are going to be occasions where I will need grace, I'll need time off. Are you willing to meet me there? And that's when we get the buy-in. Like, people feel like they have that agency, they have a boss or management that really cares in them, right? And then they're able to give that latitude to do something more entrepreneurial. That's when we get to that win-win workplace.
100%. And even as you were speaking, God's like, hey, we're the entrepreneur. We also need to create a culture that allows our team to be entrepreneurial, right?
Yes.
Like the amount of latitude that we take, you and I traveling, speaking, book tour, right? And like that same premise gets to carry through. And to your previous point, that whole like culture of like check in, check out at the end of the day, Monday through Friday, the world was very different back then. Like the amount of things that we have going on with kids in sports and lives. And like I look at the social life of my children now, it
Yes.
wasn't like mine. I was just out playing in the yard half the time.
Yeah.
And now we have like sports engagements and meetups and social clubs. And there's all this stuff that happens for like our mini me's as well. I think
Yes.
it's just such a poignant point to make and also an invitation for everybody because I think, and I've seen this before, companies end up losing money by throwing dollars at it instead of creating connection and a feedback loop and giving somebody agency to where you'll get a bigger financial gain in the company because of that buy-in and retention, but it might not actually cost you anything economically to create that same benefit where the default is like, oh, here's lunch, here's a masseuse, here will pay for your kids' care. They're like, I don't need you to pay for my kids' care, but I would love it if you would let me have a Friday afternoon to go to each one of my kids' sports games. Done.
Done. And for someone who's, it might be a music lesson and whatever that feeds them, that it matters most to them. And again, that's where we haven't been at. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today, because, like, as entrepreneurs, our resources are limited. You know, we have to think about how we're driving sales of the product, the service. When I started my world in corporate America, and I worked for Nokia, Viacom, building new businesses domestically and internationally, like, my job was new business, right? And building those. When we look to the work of the future for entrepreneurs who are going to be successful, we need every employee thinking about new business and opportunities, seeing around the corner for us. Those are the businesses that are going to be more successful, not relying on one position or one team that's going to do that. Like, everyone feels like in their DNA, like they're invested. So if they're at the kids' soccer game, who knows who that investor could be there, right? Who's also kids going to the same school. But we need employees who are like wanting to see beyond just their role and see around the corner. And so culture culture goes a long way in actually building that we're all in this together, we're all going to succeed together. Let's make sure that
Mm.
we're lining up our benefits, let's make sure we're lining up our training, right? Like, our plans and processes to engender this, like, new view of work that we want to see.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I would genuinely talk to you for like 4 hours, but I want to be respectful of time.
Yes.
But I want you to tell everybody about the book because if those were only two of the principles in the book, then I'm itching for the other seven. But can you tell everybody about the book, where to find it, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so the book is available anywhere books are sold, and they can go to readwinwinworkplace.com and see the book there. The other thing is, we're bringing these practices to life, and so if any of your listeners are interested, we're holding sessions here in Cambridge at Harvard, where we're taking cohorts of entrepreneurs who want to actually think about looking at those and applying them. And if they go in, we can put in my LinkedIn address. If they link in with me, we
Mhm.
can make sure that they get an invitation. to that. But the biggest thing we're trying to do is bring people together in community so that one, that you have other entrepreneurs that shoulder to shoulder with. Two, we're bringing in investors in the community who want to invest in entrepreneurs who are like actually working this way and they really care about this, and really building this kind of community and culture around the win-win workplace.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we'll make sure if you have your team or anybody send me all those links, we'll put it. I even have a couple people in mind that live in Boston that are entrepreneurs that I think would be like a huge benefit for that. So, for everybody listening to, I would highly, highly recommend you grab her book, and we'll have everything linked in the show notes for sure. But if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, 2 episodes, 200 episodes, or all 600, I'm sorry if you've listened to 600. I still love you. Thank you for being here. The culture is the most important part, and relationships are the most important part. And even underneath everything Dr. Angela shared are all the lessons that we talk about. And you can hear me say it, but we'll play mommy daddy games. Now you hear a college educated lecturer at Harvard telling you the same exact things, and also is plugged into the data of all of these companies. And so it's an invitation for all of us to, for lack of better analogies, to create an equal seat at our dinner table for ourselves, for our teams, and to start creating culture that'll allow us to push that bigger mission and creating agency and ownership to be able to achieve these goals that we set out to achieve. And I'm summarizing some of the things that she said, but the success of these companies, the success of our companies, does not boil down to a revenue target. It boils down to seeing around the corner and having a vision, but then not operating like a lone wolf in that vision, and using the power of your team and the power of you collectively together, which requires culture to be able to create that, and a shared vision. And the things that were shared today was like a masterclass already. But dive into the book, get the rest of the book. And personally, if any of you want to be involved in those cohorts or the community aspect, and you're near Boston or around Boston or can get close to Boston, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or check the show notes, because we're going to make sure we have all of Angela's stuff linked in the show notes. But I just wanted to summarize that because it's so powerful. And you said it at the very beginning of the show, is that culture tends to be overcomplicated like most of entrepreneurship. But what it requires is like a few simple things that we actually focus on and bring to life every day. Like they're seeds that need to be watered to have the harvest. And the things that you shared today are absolutely empowering for everybody. And so I just invite everybody to listen to them. And so I think I want to do this again if you're ever game, but I'm going to steal like 2 hours of your time, and I want to get into the backstory of Angela, plus the business, plus the college, plus like the rest of it. And so if you're ever game, I would love to do that. But I
I
just,
would love, no, I'd love to, George. And I just want to just thank you for being a light in the world. Like building a community around this, like almost conscious entrepreneurship can change the world, right?
again,
And it's going to make the work of being an entrepreneur a bit easier, right? It'll still be deep, still hours. But I think when you feel like you're not doing the whole loan with, it feels a bit better. And so I just want to thank you for creating this platform for
mhm.
people like me to actually share the insights and learnings.
Well, I couldn't do it without you, because I'm not college educated and I'm not going to do all this research. So like, thank you for filling my bucket today and sharing all of this, but also for pushing the same thing forward. Because I think, to your point, we are the ones that are going to change this culture, the entrepreneurial
Yes.
culture, the world culture. Like we're the ones doing it from the bottom up. And so it's an absolute honor. So thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, and plan B, we're going to talk about it right in the book. Like, we have to get past, do you have a degree or don't you have a degree? Because there
I
are
know.
people out there who have the skills to kill it, right? When given
Yeah.
a chance. And sometimes we block it just by looking for degrees. But that'll be part two of our conversation, George.
That'll
So
be
we'll
part.
plan
That'll
that.
be part two, because I just do it to be self-deprecating.
Yes.
I'm so grateful that we get to have this, and so I want to respect your time, and I want to say thank you. So for everybody listening, don't let this become shelf help. Go check out the book. You can find it anywhere where books are sold. It's the Win-Win Workplace, and then it's readwinwinworkplace.com. Is that what it
.com.
was?
Yep.
Okay. Readwinwinworkplace.com. Go check it out. Go read the excerpts, go grab it, and most importantly, start applying at least one thing from the book into your day to day now, whether that's to you, to your team, to your culture, but use it today. And so, either way, we'll either see you in the next episode or we will hear you in your earballs. So, God bless everybody.